Okay, so real talk. I went on a date last week, and the guy spent 20 minutes explaining his morning routine to me. Cold plunge, 45 minutes of stretching, some kind of mushroom coffee ritual. 20 minutes, guys, on a routine. I nodded along like a hostage, and the whole time I'm thinking, man, you have never had to move a 60-ton block of granite across a desert with nothing but rope, wood, and spite. Alright, switching gears today, no more of that. Because I went down a rabbit hole this week that made cold plunges look like a joke. And it's about the single most impressive construction project in human history, the Great Pyramid of Giza. You've seen it. It's on money. It's on documentaries. It's the backdrop of every ancient alien's thumbnail ever made. But here's the thing that's been eating at me. How did a Bronze Age civilization, no wheels for hauling stone, no iron tools, no pulleys as far as we can tell, stack 2.3 million blocks of stone, some weighing as much as a school bus, into a structure that stayed the tallest building on Earth for almost 4,000 years? Why did they even attempt something that insane? And why does the aliens did it theory refuse to die, when the real answer is honestly way more impressive? Let's get into it. First, let's kill the alien thing right now. Because I promised you guys accuracy, and I'm not about to insult 4,000 years of Egyptian engineering. Egyptologist Mark Lehner has spent literal decades excavating the Giza plateau, and what he and his team found wasn't evidence of extraterrestrial help. It was a city, an entire purpose-built town just south of the pyramids, called Hayt el Ghurab, the Wall of the Crow. Bakeries, breweries, bunkhouses, cattle pens with enough bones to suggest they were slaughtering the equivalent of 21 cattle and 23 sheep every single day just to feed the workforce. That's not a theory, that's a receipt. Aliens don't need bread and beer rations. Humans do. A lot of humans. So who were these humans? Here's where we bust another myth. For centuries, thanks to Herodotus writing about Egypt 2,000 years after the fact, people believed the pyramids were built by slaves, whipped into submission, dying by the thousands. Charming, right? Except the archaeology tells a different story. The skeletons found at Giza show healed fractures, which means these workers received medical care. They were buried in tombs near the pyramid itself. An honor you do not give to slave labor you consider disposable. Zahi Hawass, the former head of Egypt's antiquities ministry, has been blunt about this for years. These were not slaves. They were paid laborers, likely working in rotating shifts as a form of tax obligation to the state, alongside a permanent core of skilled craftsmen. Bet you didn't see that coming. The pyramids weren't built by misery alone. They were built by a functioning, fed, medically treated workforce operating one of the most sophisticated logistics operations of the ancient world. And this workers' village wasn't some grim labor camp either. Lehner's team found evidence of a genuine social hierarchy inside. It overseer housing separate from general worker housing, administrative buildings, even what looks like a small hospital area. There's a hieroglyphic record of work gang names too. And this is where the running bit of today's episode comes in, because I am obsessed with it. One recorded gang was literally called Friends of Khufu. Another was Drunkards of Menkaure. I want you to sit with that. 4,500 years ago, a construction crew named themselves the Drunkards. Some things never change, guys. We're going to come back to the Drunkards. Okay, so here's the wild part. We're talking about roughly 20,000 to 30,000 workers at peak construction, according to Lehner's estimates, built over an approximately 20-year reign of the pharaoh Khufu, starting around 2560 BC. Do the math on that. That means, on average, they needed to quarry, transport, and precisely place a block of stone roughly every 2 to 3 minutes for every working hour, for 2 straight decades. No weekends. No sick days that didn't have a very good reason. Just block after block after block, 10 tons average. Some pushing 60, stacked with a level of precision that modern engineers still argue about. And that precision is the part that should actually blow your mind, more than any alien theory ever could. The base of the Great Pyramid is level to within, about 2 centimeters across, a footprint of over 5 hectares. 2 centimeters, across a base wider than 9 football fields. The 4 sides are oriented to true north, with an accuracy of within 1/10 of a degree. Better alignment than some buildings constructed in the 20th century, with actual surveying instruments. How did they pull that off with no compass? No laser levels, nothing but water, string, and the stars? Why does the math work out that precisely? And why, 4,500 years later, do we still not have 100% consensus on exactly how they did the ramps? Let's talk about the how, because this is where it gets nasty in the best way. First problem, quarrying. Most of the core blocks came from a limestone quarry, Basically right there on the Giza Plateau. Convenient. But the smooth white casing stones, the ones that would have made the pyramid gleam like a mirror in the sun before erosion and looters stripped most of them away, those came from Tora, across the Nile. And the massive granite blocks used in the internal chambers? Those came from Aswan, 500 miles south. 500 miles, guys. Hauling stones that weigh as much as a loaded semi-truck. Using boats on the Nile during flood season when the water was high enough to get close to the construction site. We actually have physical proof of this logistics chain now. The Diary of Merer, a set of papyrus logbooks discovered in 2013 at a place called Wadi el-Jarf on the Red Sea coast. The oldest inscribed papyri ever found. It's a literal work journal from a middle manager named Merer, detailing his crew hauling limestone blocks by boat to Giza. I'm not making this up. We have the ancient equivalent of a shipping manifest for the Great Pyramid. And it's not just the granite. That required insane logistics. The finest white limestone casing quarried at Tora, on the east bank of the Nile, had to be cut using copper chisels and dolerite pounding stones because remember, no iron tools yet. Copper is soft. Stone is not. So imagine the sheer number of man-hours it took to slowly, painstakingly hammer and grind through limestone bedrock with a metal barely harder than the stuff you'd find in a modern penny. British archaeologist Flinders Petrie, who conducted some of the earliest rigorous surveys of Giza back in the 1880s, was so stunned by the precision of the surviving casing stones that he assumed, at first, some kind of specialized cutting tool had to exist that simply hasn't survived. Later experiments by other researchers confirmed something almost more impressive. With enough manpower, enough time, and enough patience, you genuinely can get there with just copper and stone. It's not a lost technology, it's lost tolerance for tedium, which honestly might be the more terrifying skill. Second problem, and the one that still sparks actual academic arguments: how do you lift multi-ton blocks up to 280 feet in the air with Bronze Age tools? No pulley strong enough for that load. No wheeled cranes. The leading theory, and the one most Egyptologists lean toward, involves massive ramps, either a single straight ramp, a switchback ramp wrapping the exterior, or, in a theory proposed by French architect Jean-Pierre Houdin, an internal spiral ramp built into the pyramid's body itself, which would explain some odd internal cavities detected by muon scanning technology in a project called Scan Pyramids back in 2017. That's a real thing, by the way. Physicists firing subatomic particles through solid stone to map hidden chambers, because apparently regular archaeology wasn't dramatic enough. The debate over which ramp theory is correct is genuinely unresolved. This is not settled science. Anyone who tells you with total confidence exactly how every stone got up there is skipping a very real, very active academic argument. What the Scan Pyramids project actually found in 2017 was a previously unknown void above the Grand Gallery, roughly 100 feet long, big enough to fit a commercial airplane inside. Nobody's entirely sure what it is yet. A construction gap left by the ramp building process. A structural stress relief chamber. Something else entirely. And that's kind of the perfect encapsulation of this whole topic. We put a man on the moon before we fully mapped the inside of a 4,500-year-old building sitting in plain sight outside Cairo. How did they know how to distribute the internal weight of the pyramid so it wouldn't collapse under its own mass? Why does a void that size even need to exist? Nobody's fully sure. And I kind of love that. Not every mystery needs an alien to stay a mystery. Here's another detail that gets buried under all the how were the blocks lifted discourse. The internal chambers. The king's chamber, deep inside the pyramid, is built entirely from granite hauled from Aswan, and its roof is made of 9 massive granite slabs, some estimated at over 50 tons each, stacked above the room in a configuration designed specifically to redirect the crushing weight of millions of tons of stone. Above it, out and around the chamber, instead of straight down onto it. That's not decoration. That's structural engineering that modern architects still study, done by people who had never heard the word engineering, because the concept hadn't been invented yet. They just called it building something that wouldn't collapse on the pharaoh's tomb for the rest of time. So far, it's working. What we do know is the labor was brutal in a way that has nothing to do with whips and everything to do with sheer physical grind. Teams of men using wooden sledges, wetting the sand in front of the sledge to reduce friction, which, side note, Egyptian tomb paintings literally depict this technique, and a 2014 physics study out of the University of Amsterdam confirmed that wetting sand ahead of a sledge can cut the required pulling force nearly in half. These guys were doing applied physics with zero formal physics education. Ropes made from papyrus and half a grass, strong enough to drag stones that outweighed a city bus. hauled by teams chanting in rhythm to stay synchronized. Because if one side of the team pulls out of sync with the other, the whole sledge jackknifes and someone probably dies. Let that sink in. Every single block. For 20 years. Picture the actual scene for a second, because I don't think we sit with this enough. It's peak summer on the Giza Plateau. No shade except what you brought with you. Temperatures easily crossing 40 degrees Celsius in the open sun. 172 men are on the ropes of a single sledge, based on tomb illustrations depicting similarly sized loads. One guy standing at the front pouring water onto the sand, another calling the rhythm so nobody's pull is offbeat, because an offbeat pull on a 60-ton slab isn't a minor mistake, it's a crushed foot or worse. Overseers walk the line, not with whips, based on what the archaeology tells us, but functioning more like foremen, because you don't get precision engineering out of a terrified, half-starved workforce. You get it out of trained, fed, motivated crews who've done this 1,000 times and know exactly what they're doing. That's the Friends of Khufu gang doing their job. That's the drunkards of Menkaure earning their beer rations, which, by the way, were a serious part of the daily wage. Egyptian beer at the time was thick, nutrient-dense, closer to a liquid bread than what you're picturing, and workers were allotted something like 4 to 5 liters of it a day. Cool, 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 cool. Turns out, the secret to building the last standing wonder of the ancient world was, in part, a very generous beer budget. And here's the brutal past versus shallow present contrast. I promised you guys. We complain about a slow elevator. We complain about a coworker who doesn't refill the coffee pot. Meanwhile, these guys are hauling 60-ton granite slabs 500 miles by boat up a ramp in Egyptian summer heat, and going home to a barracks to eat bread and drink beer rations before doing it again at sunrise. Don't act like you wouldn't have quit by lunch on day one. So why did they do it? Why pour this much of a nation's labor, resources, and genius into a single tomb? This is the counterintuitive twist. Because it's easy to assume this was just pharaoh ego, one guy wanting a really big grave. And sure, ego was part of it, but the deeper reason is that the pyramid was a state-building project as much as a religious one, organizing tens of thousands of workers, feeding them, housing them, paying them in bread and beer as a form of wage, running supply chains across 500 miles of river. That infrastructure didn't just build a tomb, it built the administrative backbone of the Egyptian state itself. Historians increasingly argue the pyramid-building era functioned like a massive public works program, unifying the population under a shared, almost religious sense of national purpose. The same way, honestly, some countries used space programs in the 20th century, because nothing says, we are a unified, powerful civilization like getting an entire nation to agree to move 2.3 million rocks for 2 decades straight. Think about what actually had to exist for this project to function at all. You need a taxation system precise enough to conscript rotating labor from villages across the kingdom. You need a bureaucracy capable of tracking who owes labor and when, which is essentially what Mirror's logbook is. A mid-level bureaucrat's paperwork. You need a food distribution network capable of feeding tens of thousands of people daily, without the whole operation collapsing into famine or riot. You need quality control tight enough that a granite block, quarried 500 miles away in Aswan fits, essentially perfectly, into a chamber built by a completely different crew, who never saw it get cut. That's not just religious devotion. That's a functioning, centralized state flexing every administrative muscle it has, using the pyramid as both the goal and the proof of concept. Why does the math work out that precisely? Because getting the math wrong wasn't an option. Not for the afterlife of a god king, and not for a young dynasty trying to prove it could actually run a country. Which, sure, sounds insane, until you realize the payoff. The Great Pyramid held the record as the tallest man-made structure on the planet for roughly 3,800 years, only surpassed by Lincoln Cathedral's spire in the 1300s. At 3,800 years, guys, that's longer than the entire span of recorded human history. Up to that point, stacked on top of itself twice. It's still standing. It's still nearly 2 centimeters level. It's still one of the only 7 wonders of the ancient world you can actually go stand in front of today, while the rest are rubble or legend. And here's the thing that gets me most. Sitting here, 4,500 years later, we know the pharaoh's name, Khufu. Every kid learns it, but we almost never talk about Merer, or the Friends of Khufu, or the drunkards of Menkaure. And they're the ones who actually built the thing, block by block, boat trip by boat trip, beer ration by beer ration. History remembers the guy who commissioned it. The desert remembers the guys who dragged the ropes. So next time you guys are complaining about assembling an IKEA bookshelf without the instructions. Or your GPS rerouting you 5 minutes out of the way. Just remember, somewhere around 2560 BC, a crew of Egyptian laborers, quite possibly the drunkards themselves, still nursing yesterday's beer ration, hauled a 60-ton granite slab 500 miles down a river, up a ramp nobody can fully agree on the shape of, and stacked it within a hair's width of. Mathematically perfect, using rope, wet sand, and pure human coordination. No cranes, no trucks, no aliens, just guys, actual guys, like the guy in that logbook, Mirror, doing his job, one boat trip at a time. If this blew your mind even a fraction as much as it blew mine researching it, smash the like button, and drop your take in the comments. Do you buy the internal ramp theory, or are you team external switchback? I want to know. And if you want more of the how did ancient humans actually pull this off content, go ahead and hit subscribe, because trust me, we are just getting started.